Maybe she didn't know her parents. Rebekah was the daughter of Bethuel, who was Abraham's nephew, the son of his brother. But when Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for his son Isaac, the servant happened upon Rebekah. No, he didn't happen upon her. She happened upon him and drew water for him and his camels and fulfilled the servant's request to God for a sign to accompany the wife God wanted for Isaac. So God brought Rebekah to the servant, and she drew the water exactly as the servant had asked that the wife chosen by God for Isaac would. And she continued to show hospitality to the traveling servant and brought him home to meet not her father, but her brother, Laban, who was acting as head of the household. Maybe he always had, as long as Rebekah could remember. Maybe she hadn't ever known her own parents. Maybe that's why she was willing to go with him and marry a man she'd never met, even though she was his first cousin once removed. If she maybe never knew her parents, but had only ever been under the care of her brother Laban, who was maybe much older and maybe saw her as even more of a liability than the way even parents tended to think of daughters in a culture in which daughters have nothing and it costs something to get them married off and into other families in which they can be productive. If Laban was desperate to marry off his sister and saw the opportunity to profit from the arrangement, having seen the gifts the servant had given Rebekah when he met her and she fulfilled his request to God for a sign, then maybe she was desperate to get married off too, and to get away not from parents who loved her, but from a brother who tolerated her. Maybe a servant who was somewhat bafflingly overjoyed at their meeting and who offered marriage to a wealthy stranger was her way to finally find a life of her own. More her own, anyway. Then she covered herself with a veil when she met her husband, and though she was reportedly beautiful, she did not see Isaac's reaction to her beauty until after they were married, and so it was only ever the chaste reaction of a husband admiring the wife God gave him out of all other women. And Isaac loved her, and it was a different love than she had ever experienced, as it should be when a husband loves his wife, but maybe it was also different in that she now had what she'd never had yet. Her family. Not her brother's, hers. And Isaac, maybe too, had lost his mother the way she maybe never had known hers, and they comforted each other, and she helped him in a way that was so different from any way she'd been helpful before, in a way that was better, because even though God made it happen, he had let her also choose it for herself. And God made it happen that she conceived twins. The boys jostled in her womb, and she asked herself, why is this happening to me? And then she asked God the same question, and he told her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. When Jacob and Esau were born, Esau came out first, making Jacob the younger, whom he would serve. Isaac did what dads often do and held his oldest in a special place in his heart, and Rebekah did what moms often do and especially cherished the baby. Both did what sinners do and play favorites. They let the love they felt for one son mean that they didn't have the same amount of love for the other. Maybe on her part, because she had never known her parents, while her brother Laban had, and seemed to have benefited from that, and seemed to have been preferred in that small way, making it okay for her to have a preference of her own, for her to make a choice. And even though her choice lined up with what God himself had said about the younger being served by the older, it was sinful and led to more sin. She encouraged her favorite son to deceive her husband and rob her least favorite son of the blessing that God had said would fall to her favorite son anyway. And I am suggesting that maybe she had reasons for her sins, like never knowing her parents. But having reasons isn't the same as having excuses. There are no excuses for sin, even if there can be all kinds of different reasons. So why do I keep bringing it up? Well, because her kids did know their parents, and it was Jacob and Esau's parents that made the sinful choices that God used to fulfill his promise to Rebekah. And maybe God used the fact that Rebekah didn't know her parents and so ended up with reasons to make the sinful choices as a parent that put God's plan into motion. Maybe, no, definitely, Rebekah was exactly the mom that Jacob, the ancestor of the Messiah, Jesus, needed to put him where he needed to be to become the ancestor of the Messiah and fulfill God's promises to Adam and Eve and Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah. And you and me. Without ever once excusing sin, God can turn it into the reason his will gets done in the way he wanted it done. Maybe she never knew her parents, and that's why things went the way they did. Or maybe there's a different reason. Either way, Rebekah was who she needed to be. She made the choices, good and bad, that only she would make, and God did amazing things with them. You are too. You do too. God does too. With you. No maybe. You and I are dust and breath, loved by God, bought by Jesus. This podcast is written and produced by me, Ethan Cherney, a Wells pastor serving Bethel Lutheran Church of Menasha, Wisconsin. Get in touch on Facebook at Dust and Breath Pod, on Twitter at Dust Breath Pod, or by emailing dustandbreathpod@gmail.com. Outro music arranged and performed by Mr. Peter Shawy, who is like a shelter from the wind and a refuge from the storm. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you could leave a review in iTunes or just share an episode on social media, I'd really appreciate it. It's the only way other people can find the show. Now, go do what God made you to do. Be who God called you to be. Go see what God can do with dust and breath and faith in Jesus, his Son.